Reports based on the leaked Facebook papers indicate that Facebook was certainly aware that changes that they made to their newsfeed configurations spread dangerous content more rapidly. Each of our witnesses have mentioned this in one form or another already. Yet company leaders repeatedly argue that they are investing in trust, safety, and civic integrity efforts. I'm certainly struck, as I think you are, by this fundamental conflict between efforts to take down hateful and violent content and company algorithms that seem to amplify extremist views simultaneously. Mr. Sifry, can you speak to this apparent conflict? You've mentioned in your opening comments, but a little more in depth, if you would, please. And how successful can these social media companies be at content moderation if they continue to design their own platforms to amplify extreme content?
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for that excellent question. I think it really cuts to the heart of the conversation here, that at its core, what we're talking about is the incentive systems that drive this business model, a business model that is based around getting you engaged. And when, unfortunately, the natural human biases that we have towards engaging with controversial, with polarizing, with content that makes us afraid, with incendiary content, what happens? Well, all of those indicators that were talked about earlier, right? Likes, shares, retweets, you name it, that those indicators go up. And so these platforms, Senator, are working as designed. What that ends up happening is that we end up spending more time on those platforms and they end up tracking us more. And then they get to send us more hyper-targeted ads. So this won't change until there is a clear shift in the incentive systems that they use to be able to do this business. And that's where Congress must act, in creating systems that actually bring about a change in their incentive systems. That's how we end up getting them to behave rationally in this sense, right? And move towards those different incentive systems.
Ambassador Kornblum, just to follow up basically on that question, in your opinion, can investments in trust and safety ever overcome a business model that prioritizes advertising revenues based on extremist content and the desire to keep people on a platform as long as possible?
I think it goes right to the heart. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure does that work? Okay, thanks. That goes right to the heart of the question. The algorithm is this machine that's pushing misinformation or extremist content into users' feed. It's recommending these extremist groups. It's targeting small groups of people with ads designed to agitate them. It's the mechanics of the system that are working. And then these poor human content moderators or even outmatched AI systems, as Dr. O'Neill was talking about, don't stand a chance. So their own data shows that less than 1% of content that depicts violence or could incite violence is caught. This is content that violates their own terms of service. And this is true. There's new revelations today about even something that was a high priority for Mark Zuckerberg, which is catching COVID misinformation. Apparently, they're unmatched at the content moderation, even there. An international vaccine expert that I talked to told me he was so frustrated because he felt that the disinformation purveyors were working with the motor of social media and that the public health officials were fighting against the engine of social media. And I always think of, if you'll excuse this vision, I always think of that I Love Lucy skit when she and Ethel are on the candy conveyor belt and they're desperately trying to, go as fast as a conveyor belt. These content moderators just don't have a chance.
Well, I want you to continue on this line of questioning, Ambassador. Earlier this year, a report found that Facebook was posting ads for body armor, gun holsters, and other military equipment right next to content promoting the 2020 election misinformation and news about the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. So getting this content and ads for military equipment. What do we know about how Facebook and the platform targets their advertising and this kind of link? Can you talk to me a little bit more about what you are finding?
Yeah, yeah, and this is, there's so much here, and it's overwhelming, and it's hard to get our heads around this advertisement of these kinds of weapons. But there are three ways in which ads in general drive extremism. First, it's very different than what we think of in terms of cable and broadcast ads, where they're micro-targeted specifically to the people who would be most moved by them, and other users who might object, who might say, oh, that's violent, or oh, that's wrong, they don't get to see them. And the ad content isn't reviewed by humans before it's placed, so as they are on broadcast and cable. And thirdly, users can't really find out who's paying for these ads. Even political ads can just list a dark money group instead of their true sponsor, which could be a foreign government. So in 2016, remember, there were ads paid for in rubles that got through because there's no human monitoring this and there's very little transparency. And then as we've talked about, the algorithms are designed to maximize this ad revenue. So the ads are driving the whole thing. They're keeping you online to be fed the ads. And the incendiary content keeps users on the platforms longer. And then there's this third element that I think it's really important to think about. The algorithms that are trying to keep you online to feed you these ads, they're creating a marketplace that values extremism. So the more extremist the content, the better the distribution will be. The cheaper the ads will be, actually. It's a cheaper ad if it's more incendiary per unit because it gets wider spread distribution. So it's creating this marketplace. Political parties apparently came to Facebook and said, your algorithm is driving us to put out more incendiary content because it's the only way we can get distributed. If we just put out our 10-point plan, it doesn't get distributed online. So the ads are really the heart of this matter.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank once again our witnesses for joining us here today. I think I speak for the entire committee when we say we appreciate your very unique insight and expertise in helping us examine this critical issue and navigate the tough challenge ahead. Today's hearing provided an opportunity for us to learn about the role of social media platforms play in the amplification of extremist content, including white nationalist and anti-government ideologies. We heard expert testimony about how their algorithms and recommendation tools are driving extreme content users, how that exposure to harmful content can translate to real-world violence, and how their business models built on user engagement and targeted advertising appear to prioritize profits over safety. The connection between extremist content on social media platforms and domestic terrorist attacks in our communities is without question a national security threat, and one this committee will continue to examine. Our next steps will be to include a hearing from the social media companies themselves, and we will work to bring more transparency to this pressing issue. I'm also seeking information from both the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI on this threat, and we'll be looking for needed reforms. The record for this hearing will remain open for 15 days until 5 p.m. on November 12th, 2021 for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.